The grand ballroom of the Vandermeer estate shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers, the air thick with the scent of gardenias and expensive perfume. Society's elite twirled across the marble floor, their laughter ringing hollow against the undercurrent of whispered gossip. At the center of it all stood Eleanor Vandermeer, the radiant but restless heiress, her emerald green gown drawing every eye, even as her own gaze darted toward the shadowed archway leading to the gardens. Eleanor's gloved fingers tightened around her champagne flute as her fiancé, Richard Montague, leaned in to murmur something in her ear. His smile was polished, practiced, the perfect picture of aristocratic charm, but something in his tone made her spine stiffen. Before she could reply, Aunt Beatrice materialized beside them, her hawk-like eyes missing nothing. "Eleanor, the Duke of Harsworth expects an introduction," she said, her voice brooking no argument. For a fleeting moment, rebellion flashed in Eleanor's eyes. Then, with a murmured excuse, she slipped away, weaving through the crowd toward the terrace. The cool night air was a relief after the stifling ballroom. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a man in a servant's coat, his face obscured by the brim of his hat. He pressed a folded note into her hand. Her breath hitched as she read it, then crumpled the paper into her palm. A maid, dusting a nearby alcove, later swore she heard Eleanor hiss, "I won't let them force me." Moments after, the heiress vanished into the garden's labyrinth of hedges. The last witness was the butler, who glimpsed her arguing with a silhouetted figure near the fountain before the night swallowed them both. By midnight, the orchestra had played its final waltz. The guests departed, and Eleanor Vandermeer was gone, leaving behind only a single pearl earring glinting on the cobblestones and the first thread of a mystery waiting to unravel. The rain lashed against the windows of the Vandermeer library, turning the glass into a distorted mirror that flickered with candlelight. Detective Harlan Pierce stood near the fireplace, his sharp eyes scanning the room, not just for clues, but for the unspoken tensions that clung to the air like smoke. The family had summoned him at dawn, their voices tight with the kind of panic that only the very rich could afford to conceal behind polished manners. Aunt Beatrice sat rigidly in a high-backed chair, her knuckles white around a handkerchief. She wouldn't just leave, she insisted, though her tone suggested she knew otherwise. Richard Montague paced near the bookshelves, his usual charm fraying at the edges. Eleanor was troubled lately, he admitted, a little too quickly. But surely this is just a misunderstanding. Pierce said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence made people nervous, and nervous people made mistakes. The butler, a gaunt man with the posture of a soldier, stepped forward. "Miss Vandermeer received a letter last evening," he confessed. "She seemed agitated after reading it. I didn't see the sender, but the seal was unusual, black wax with a crescent moon." A maid, her hands trembling as she twisted her apron, added, "I heard her say something strange. I won't let them force me." She was near the garden doors when she said it. Pierce knelt by the terrace entrance, his fingers brushing against a scrap of paper caught in the door's hinge. A torn train ticket, the destination blurred by rain, but the date was clear. Last night's midnight express to Blackcliff. He tucked the ticket into his coat pocket, his mind already racing. Missing heiresses didn't vanish without help, and the more he listened, the more he was certain. Eleanor hadn't just disappeared. She'd been driven to it. The drawing room of the Montague townhouse was all gilded edges and cold sunlight, the kind of place where even the furniture seemed to judge. Richard Montague poured himself a brandy with steady hands, but Detective Pierce noticed the way his cufflinks caught the light, slightly askew, as if fastened in haste. Cards, Richard said smoothly. I was at my club all evening. A dozen gentlemen can vouch for me. He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving Pierce's. Poor Eleanor. She's always been prone to dramatics. Perhaps she needed air. Perhaps she'll return by supper. Pierce flipped open his notebook. The Whitmore Club, then. What time did you arrive? A beat too long. 10:30, I believe. And the names of these dozen witnesses? Richard's smile tightened. Must we bother them? I assure you, Detective, this is all a trifle. She's likely hiding at some friend's country house. She does that when she's cross. Pierce let the silence stretch. The grandfather clock ticked like a metronome counting down to a lie. Then, softly, Odd. The Whitmore's ledger shows no record of you that night. Richard's glass hit the side table with a sharp clink. A clerical error. And the midnight train to Blackcliff? Pierce pressed. Why would your fiancée buy a ticket under a false name the same night she vanished? For the first time, Richard's polished mask slipped, just a flash of something feral in his eyes. You'd do well, he hissed, to remember who pays your fee. Outside, a carriage rattled past. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed. And Pierce knew two things with perfect clarity. Richard Montague was lying, and Eleanor had been right to run. The Vandermeer family vault was a cathedral of greed, all marble and cold iron, smelling of old ledgers and dried ink. Beatrice Vandermeer stood before the open safe, her skeletal fingers tracing the edges of a document stamped with the Vandermeer crest. The terms are quite clear, she said without turning. If Eleanor is deceased or declared legally dead, the estate reverts to my control, permanently. Detective Pierce stepped closer, watching how the candlelight carved shadows into the hollows of her cheeks. And if she's found alive? Beatrice's laugh was the sound of ice cracking. Then the girl squanders another decade of my patience and this family's legacy on her childish rebellions. She snapped the safe shut. You've seen the newspapers, running off with actors, pawned heirlooms to fund socialist rallies. The Vandermeer name cannot survive another scandal. Pierce picked up a framed miniature from the desk. A young Eleanor, her smile not yet hardened by society. You disciplined her often, then? I prepared her. Beatrice's cane struck the floor like a gavel. Blood means duty. She chose to forget that. A maid's muffled sob echoed from the hall. The girl, no older than 16, flinched when Beatrice turned. Out! As the door closed, Pierce spotted it, a ledger entry dated the day before the disappearance. £500 withdrawn. For what? Beatrice adjusted her lace collar. Household matters. Odd timing. Pierce flipped the page. Even odder that this matches the exact sum missing from Eleanor's trust. The silence thickened. Somewhere, a clock struck noon. Then Beatrice smiled, a thin, terrible thing. Find her, detective, before the city does. The cobblestone streets near the docks exhaled the day's heat in damp, rotting breaths. Detective Pierce turned up his collar against the smell of fish guts and cheap gin, the address from Eleanor's pawn ticket burning in his pocket. The Silver Eel, a tavern where the lanterns swung like hanged men in the fog. Inside, the barkeep didn't look up from wiping glasses. Ain't seen her. But his eyes flicked to the back stairwell, just once. The upper hallway was a throat of peeling wallpaper. Behind the last door, a man waited in silhouette, his face half lit by a guttering candle. Broad-shouldered, with a sailor's calloused hands, but the way he moved, like a blade sheathed in silk, spoke of money long lost. You're the detective, he said, not a question. She told me you'd come. Pierce stepped inside. Then you know where Eleanor Vandermeer is. A slow smile. I know where she wanted to be. He tossed a pawnbroker's stub onto the table, the mate to Pierce's ticket. She sold the emerald pendant 2 days ago, not for money, for passage. On a ship? The Morning Star sailed for Buenos Aires at dawn. The stranger's grin turned knife sharp. But you already guessed that? Pierce studied the man's cufflinks, silver, monogrammed RL, and you are someone who'll be on the next boat out. He stood, looming suddenly in the cramped space. Tell Richard Montague that. Tell him she'd rather drown than wear his ring. The candle snuffed itself in a draft. When Pierce blinked, the room was empty, just the salt wind howling through a cracked window and the stub of a first-class ticket crushed under his boot. The attic of Vandermeer Manor exhaled decades of dust as Detective Pierce pried open Eleanor's childhood dollhouse, a miniature replica of the estate itself, down to the chipped blue shutters. Taped beneath its gabled roof was a letter, the paper brittle with age but the ink still defiantly fresh. My dearest Elle, they mean to bury me alive in silk and signatures. Aunt B has threatened to disinherit me if I refuse Richard's hand by the solstice, and Richard, God, he whispers such kind words when others are near. But last week, I found his ledger. The debts, the missing rents. He doesn't want a wife. He wants a vault with a pulse. You were right. There's no winning this game, only escape. Meet me at the docks when the clock strikes false midnight. Bring the tickets and the pistol. The signature was smudged as if written in haste or tears. Pierce turned the page over, scrawled on the back in a different hand. Burn this. They're watching you too. A floorboard creaked below. The detective slipped the letter into his coat just as the attic door groaned open. Looking for ghosts, detective? Richard Montague stood on the threshold, a smile playing at his lips. Funny. I heard this house already has one. Outside, the wind screamed through the eaves like a woman laughing. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.